The Skeleton Tree. Chapter 6. The Edge of Our World. Yes.
Something has gone very wrong. Of all the things I've imagined, I never once thought of fog. But far to the north and out to the west, the sea is hidden by a thick, white blanket. A voice whispers doubts in my ears. Nobody's coming. It was only a dream. How will anyone find us if our world shrinks to a gray circle? I shout aloud, trying to drive away the thoughts. Today is the day. This is the day we will be saved. Just off the shore, a seal pops its head from the sea and stares at me with enormous eyes. It must think I'm crazy to be screaming at the sky, but I've told Frank that if we have any doubts, it will not happen. If we believe we will be saved, we'll be saved. I keep chanting, today is the day, help's on the way. Today is the day, help's on the way. I repeat it over and over until the words become a senseless jumble, but the fog is growing thicker. I can see it spreading south. I glance back at the meadow, at the trees and the dark bushes. If Frank appears now, he might lose hope. He might blurt out words that will ruin everything. On the grass, beside my favorite chair, are the drums we've made from a bucket and a metal barrel. I sit, take up the sticks, and start to beat a rhythm on the barrel. It's a savage sort of sound that rumbles out across the sea. Boom, boom. Boom, 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 boom. My arms move like levers. The sticks bounce up from the drum. I drive them down again. Boom, 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 boom. Frank would not believe me, but I can drum the fog away. I pound on the drum, but the fog keeps rolling closer. I can imagine it creeping along the shoreline, covering the river, swallowing the boulders, filling the old boat with a cold gray gloom. When I first saw the boat, I thought we were saved. It sat upright along the logs like a bird in a fabulous nest. I thought we could drag it down to the water and sail away, and I ran towards it. But when I got a bit closer, I saw that the boat was a wreck. A log had pierced the cabin windows in the back and out the front, like a huge wooden nail. It pinned the boat to the land. Shattered glass lay everywhere. A name was still painted on the bow, though it had nearly faded away. Reepicheep. Frank frowned as he touched the letters.
What the heck does that mean?
It's a mouse, I told him. Reepicheep was a warrior, the bravest mouse in Narnia. And
who cares?
Said Frank. He slipped around behind the boat, then appeared on the deck, popping up between the logs. The boat gave me a feeling of sadness, and I didn't go any closer. I stood fiddling with the raven's red wire while Frank explored the places where the fishermen had lived and worked and maybe died. He crawled right inside the wreck, through a narrow gap between the planks and the gravel. I could hear him shouting that the engine was still in the boat, that he'd found a jigging line, that he'd found a gaff. When he came out, he was happy. The gaff was stout and heavy, a club with a hook on the end. The jig was a pink lure wrapped with fishing line around a rusted bolt. Frank nodded towards the deck.
That was his boat.
Whose boat? I asked.
The cabin guy,
cried Frank.
Who do you think, moron? He was shipwrecked.
No, I said. It's been here for ages. Frank nodded.
So was the guy.
Not for 10 years. Frank echoed me mockingly.
10 years? Like you would know.
Then how long do you think? He crossed his arms and studied the stranded boat. Waves pounded on the beach behind us.
A year, he said, maybe 2.
It seemed crazy at first, but he might have been right. One long winter of snow and storms could have made the boat look ancient. Frank stuffed the jig into his pocket and started north again. He let the gaff swing by its hook like a walking stick. The stones rolled under our feet, and a sound like rain moved along with us, as thousands of tiny crabs scuttled into hiding places. Around the next bend, the beach was scattered with enormous boulders. The waves made a steady roar and rattled as they broke on the beach, and a great chunk of styrofoam tumbled back and forth. Then the shoreline turned again, and we found ourselves at the mouth of a river. It tumbled out of the forest, down a stony waterfall, into a vast pool of salt water. I could see salmon fins and tails slicing through the surface, their bodies gliding like shadows underneath. That river would become the edge of our world. There was no point in trying to go farther. To the north was only more of what we'd already seen. More rocks, more forest, more sea and mountain. But I felt happy here. A cool breeze came down from the river, smelling of forest and fish. A rainbow made an arch above the falls, and the water cascaded from ledge to ledge in curls of creamy white. Salmon flung themselves against the waterfall, trying to struggle up the river. It didn't seem possible that they could ever reach the top, but of course they would. Or most of them would. They would fight their way right into the mountains, to the exact spot where they had been born, just to lay their eggs before they died. It was a beautiful thing to see, sad and brave at the same time. But to Frank it meant nothing. He went straight to the pool, thrust the gaff in the water, and shaded his eyes to peer under the surface. Through layers of cold and patches of light, hundreds of fish swam around and around. There were so many that Frank could hardly miss, and in a moment he had one speared on the hook. He hauled the salmon out, a shining thing that thrashed so hard he could barely hold on. He swung it around and slammed it down on the stones. Using the gaff as a club, he hit it 3 times while it twisted on the ground. Blood and scales splattered on his clothes, his face, and his hands. But he grinned as he held up the fish, so big that its tail nearly touched the ground. He tossed his hair aside. With sunlight mottled in the trees behind him, with the silver of the fish, it was as though the old photographer of my father had come to life. I remembered my mother smiling at the picture, and I wondered what she was doing right then. I wondered if I would ever get to see her.
Isn't that a beauty?
Said Frank. I saw how he strained to hold that heavy fish. It sure is, I said, but I didn't sound enthusiastic, and his smile vanished. He dropped the salmon and started fishing again. It lay stiff at his feet, already not quite so shiny, as though the glistening brightness was part of its life, its spirit. Now it just looked dead, and the scales sparkled on the rock instead, in a smear of slime and blood. Frank didn't catch another. Maybe the fish were smarter, or maybe he was trying too hard. He swished the gaff through the water, swearing whenever he missed.